Hey everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much. It's Monday at noon. We're going to do another Freight Broker Bootcamp live. If you're catching this on replay, then hit me up in the comments with hashtag replay. You're definitely not going to want to miss this. Today, I have another Freight Broker interview. Okay, so this is an interview with a past student of Freight Broker Bootcamp. You're going to be I think you're going to be super inspired. I know I was when I first spoke with him. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's Elio Longoria. He's here with me today. But before we get into all that, okay, we're going to let some people get live. And as always, we're going to hit me up in the chat box and let me know the city and state that you're logging in from. Just to give you a quick heads up, I'm in the Buffalo, New York area. For those of you that know me, Elio's in Houston, Texas. So give us a shout out, and we'll try to give you a shout out back before we dive into the interview. And just so you know, as always, I'm going to give away another Freightpreneur shirt. Okay, I'm going to give that away today. We're going to do a quick let's get the ball rolling, and then we're going to give this away. I give this away right before the Q&A, which will be at the end. So this shirt says, well, I actually have it on, so it's cool. Freightpreneur, someone who solves problems you don't know you have in ways you can't understand. It's really funny that's what this says, because Elio and I were just talking about that exact topic. And so it should make for a very interesting interview. Let me give some shout outs to everybody here real quick, and then we'll get this ball rolling. So we got Paul Spates from Frisco, Texas. There's another Texas guy for you. We've got John from Springfield, Missouri. We've got, it's a little weird doing this on my Mac. We've got Javinder from Brampton, Canada. We got Tiffany from Berlin, New Jersey. We have Cyretha from East St. Louis, Illinois. We have Wawa Julius Nila from Dallas, Texas. We've got Charles from Austin. Lots of Texas people today. It's good. We got Walter from Newcastle, Delaware. We got Nepster from Compton, California. Jessica from Pocahontas, Arizona. Patty from Rock Springs, Wyoming. Regina from Raleigh, North Carolina. Shay from, I lost track of it. Where was Shay from? Man, this thing jumped. Cool. Shay from Cartersville, Georgia. Lavera from Lafayette, Louisiana. Michelle from Springfield, Ohio. Derek from Nassau, Bahamas. Nice. I hope you're on vacation and not actually working on the beach. Terrell from Minnesota. Mr. Bobby Brown from Las Vegas. David from St. Paul, Minnesota. Jarrell from Marino, California. Man, we got a lot of people live today, so I'm excited, and I hope you are too. If I didn't get a chance to give you a shout out, come back next week. I'll try to do it again. I do want to get to the interview, but before we do that, we're going to do this giveaway really quick, okay? I never imagined in my wildest dreams that this shirt would become as popular as it is. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's crazy, because I get emails, I get Facebook messages, YouTube messages. It's crazy. So I'm going to give away this shirt. It's Freightpreneur, someone that solves problems you don't know you have in ways that you can't understand. I'm going to give away one of these shirts. Now, you got to be in the U.S. because, again, I'm not going to ship this to some foreign country. It's going to cost me twice as much as the shirt, okay? So if you're in the U.S., all you need to do right now is to share the stream. And then I don't care if you're on Facebook or YouTube or where you share it on Instagram, Twitter, wherever. Get a copy of the link and share the stream. And if you do, when you do, come back into the feed and just hit me up with hashtag shared. That'll tell me that you did it. And again, this is an honor system. I'm not going to go out and check the links while we're doing this live, but it's an honor system. So make sure that you actually share the stream. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. All right, you got to do it right now. And then after the interview, we're going to give away the shirt right before we go into Q&A, okay? So make sure you guys go out and share the stream. Truly appreciate it. The goal here, obviously, is I do these free trainings every Monday at noon. Today's not so much of a training, but an interview. These interviews are typically very popular, and I think you're really going to enjoy Elio's story and his wife and what they have going on down there in Houston, Texas, and how it all transpired. Because, we were just talking about, again, we spoke maybe a couple weeks ago, and we were just talking about it again, and it's kind of a crazy, interesting, fun story that I think will inspire you guys. So, again, if you want a chance to win that shirt, hashtag shared, okay? All right, guys. So let's do this. Let's dive in, and then after the interview, we will do the shirt giveaway, and then we'll do the live. And for live questions, just so you know, at the end, we're going to entertain questions. I'm going to open it up. If Elio wants to answer some of those questions, I will certainly try to answer any questions you have. We're not going to be able to maybe stick on here quite as long as maybe normal, because Elio's got some freight to cover and he's got a business to run, and I want to respect that time. So, all right, so here we are. Elio Longoria, welcome to the show.
Morning or afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. Thank you so much. Well, listen, I'm so glad that we connected. I don't remember exactly how it transpired. Maybe it was through Facebook or an email, but you told me that you were a past student, and then you started telling me your story, and I had to jump on the phone with you. So we got on the phone. This was a couple of weeks ago, and you started telling me a little bit about your journey, and you're really just a brand new startup. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Cool. So tell me, what attracted you to the freight brokerage industry? Because you were working in corporate America, right? Can you kind of tell us how that whole thing evolved?
Yeah. So I've been in corporate America for about 15, 16 years now, and primarily always, business management, sales primarily. It's sales focused. And about, I want to say 8 months ago, June of last year, a buddy of mine got intrigued by the trucking industry. And, that kind of really planted the seed for me, and him and I actually are trained sparring partners in jiu-jitsu, and we have a real close relationship, and I respect the hell out of him, but he's got that entrepreneur spirit. He wanted to kind of take that leap. And so he came across a person in the fall of last year and basically sold him a dream, how great trucking would be, and this and that. And, come to find out, it intrigued me. And I said, listen, I can't jump in with you, but I'll definitely consult on the sidelines and do the best that I can. So I just, what ended up happening, one thing led to another, and nights and weekends turned into YouTube videos, of people like yourself and others, and just kind of learning more, buying books about the logistics industry in general. And then at the end of last year, I thought that evolved into, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be a trucker or own trucks, but what I'll do, I'll start a dispatching company. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. Until one day in November, I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I told him what I was thinking about. He goes, you know what? He goes, well, you probably didn't know this, but we pay brokers like a crazy amount of money to move freight for us. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, yeah. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, listen, I don't think he good at, because I told him I wanted a dispatch, not broker. To me, broker seemed like an overwhelming, far-fetched, idea that I didn't think I had the capabilities to do. And he goes, yeah, dude. He goes, he gave me an amount. He goes, we pay this to send it from here to New York. I'm like, interesting. So I hauled ass back to the house, and I made a phone call, and I called a few truckers, and I asked them, hey, what's this normally go for? And when I heard the amount, I'm thinking, I identified the gap. I'm like, there's something here. And long story short, January 1, after pondering the idea, on January 1, the first thing I did that Friday morning was go to the FMCSA website. I dropped $300 and I applied for my license, and then the paperwork started from there. I looked at the calendar, and I gave myself 6 weeks to put a plan together and work backwards from that date.
And what's really interesting is you were still working in corporate America full time when you kind of identified the gap. You went and filed for your authority, all of that, right? You were still working full time in corporate America.
Right. Yeah. And it's not a 40-hour week program. Unfortunately, it's early morning sales meetings, late night promotions sometimes. And then it's, with Zoom calls and working out in the field. And then unfortunately, my wife and I both got COVID. So we had 2 little kids to manage at the same time, and God blessed us, and they didn't get COVID. So we all made it out okay, and everything was
Thank
cool.
God.
So, it just, to be honest with you, that was another reason why I thought, hey, look, this is a sign. You don't want to be in your deathbed looking back one day thinking, damn, I never gave myself a shot. I never believed in myself. So it's like, let's rock and roll.
Love it. So you went through the process. So you enrolled in Freight Broker Bootcamp, correct?
I did, Dennis. I think I did it right after I applied for the FMCSA license. And I said, I'm gonna need some training. So I did that along with some Amazon books that I found online, and I found your course to be pretty helpful. Yeah. The resources that you provided were pretty kind of cut and dry. The articles, I think you referenced in one of your videos. That's when I became really hooked on your videos and started taking certain nuggets and tidbits and trying to piece it all together. And I used that to develop a plan. In fact, you and I actually interacted a lot through your YouTube videos. And I was kind of telling you, you know what, this is spot on. This is exactly what we use today to build annual business plans. It's real basic. It's not complicated stuff. So I actually went ahead and printed the articles that you provided for us. And I knew I wasn't going to always have access to the computer. So as I'm driving around, any spare minute I had, I would pop that article thing open and just start reading it. It turned into reading time with my kids, where they read their books, and then I was reading, the Freight Broker Bootcamp article directory.
I love it. Perfect. Yeah, and the thing about it is this. What I love about it is that you took the initiative and you took a little bit of risk, a calculated risk, about going out and applying for your authority even before you bought the training. I mean, the reality is, guys, I'm going to be very honest with you. To apply for your freight broker authority is just not that complicated, right? If you go to the FMCSA freight broker, registration page, it literally will walk you through it. I mean, there's some forms and a little bit of lingo you'll have to understand, but there's nothing that you can't learn there to apply for your authority. So I get this question all the time from people. They're like, well, after this, after I take Freight Broker Bootcamp, will I have my authority? No, we teach you how to get your authority, but that's a very small percentage of what the course is about. The course is more about, starting with, a little bit of education and lingo and terminology and understanding the basics of the market, then your authority. And then it's kind of launching the program more, setting up your home office and understanding the fundamentals of rating and how freight moves and some of the sales and customer acquisition stuff. So, I mean, that's where the course is really more valuable, right, than just the actual setting up your authority. We don't do, authority, we don't do done for you authority processing. I mean, because you don't need it. I mean, the fact is you really don't need it. There's people out there you can pay to do it, but I'm not going to be one of those guys, right? I teach you, I don't feed you, right? It's that type of deal. So you went forward, you applied for your authority, you went through some of the Freight Broker Bootcamp training, and then tell us what happened next. Tell us a little bit of that journey. You should be able to summarize that fairly quickly because you're literally you started operations, the beginning of March?
Yes, March 1. The initial plan, my 6-week plan, was to kick things off part-time, nights and weekends and after work. And obviously, my wife and I had a pretty decent regimen of working out early in the morning. So that, for me, that kind of skipped out, and that turned into from working out to working on this. And so February 15th, that's when we're going to look to kick things off and start cold calling and set an email blast and LinkedIn and kind of more or less hide behind the logo, right? I didn't want to expose myself totally yet. And that was the week of the big storm, freeze in Texas. So everybody was at a halt and nothing was happening. So then I gave myself a goal of landing at least one customer in the first 2 weeks of February. It didn't pan out. I landed my first customer on February 26th on a Friday afternoon after I just finished cold calling them earlier that week. And it's turns, I followed up with them. I gave them some quotes, and I won't forget, it was like on a Thursday night. I sent out some quotes and I was nervous as hell. I'm like, what am I doing with quotes? I don't know what the hell to quote, but I did my due diligence. I went online. I called a couple of, carriers. And I got some feedback. I said, you know what? I'm just going to take my shot here, because if I don't, then I'll never know if I came close or not. So I shot it. He comes back Friday, goes, hey, listen, we're, granted this project and we need help with trucks. So at the moment, I probably should have said, hey, we need to get this to a more experienced freight broker. And I did the complete opposite. I said, you know what, we're on it. And so we didn't sleep that entire weekend. We worked all day, Saturday and Sunday. I didn't have much luck by Friday afternoon. So as I'm driving to my kids' basketball practice, I had to call the shipper and ask for an increase on the truck payout. And he got it approved within 45 minutes. So then Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, that's exactly what we did, is we booked all the trucks necessary for that project on Monday. And I even went out and got my own PPE at Home Depot on Sunday. And I've never owned boots in my life. I got boots and a hard hat. And I actually drove to the site at 4 a.m. just to kind of see if my trucks were going to get there on time. And when I got there, they're like, the guys were like, who the hell are you? And what are you doing? I'm like, I'm with Interfire Logistics. I'm a freight broker. Oh, you're the guy with the trucks. Like, yeah, come on through. Okay, sounds good. Because we're going to have a quick sales meeting. Basically, it's just a bunch of us screaming at each other. So just bear with us for about 30 minutes and then we'll get going. And sure enough, our truck started showing up, and I was just kind of waving at them. They didn't know who the hell I was, but they're like, "Who's this guy waving at me?" And
I love that.
I got a lot of like, "Hey, we've never had freight brokers come out to the job sites." I'm like, you know what? It's a new client, it's a new project, so I just want to make sure things are kind of going the way they need to go. So it was neat. It was an experience.
And so what were the results of that? So you hustled, you covered a bunch of loads, the truck started coming in, and this was basically like a project, right? You would kind of bid on X number of trucks for a certain project that this client was doing. What was the end result? We'll dig into some of the middle parts, but what was the end result of that first client in that first week of actually moving freight?
75 shipments and $46,000 in sales.
And that resulted in about how much in profit? A little over 7,000?
Correct.
So $46,000 in revenue, $7,000 in profit. Now, when we say profit, guys, for those of you that are new, we're talking about gross margin, the difference between what you're charging the shipper and what you're paying the truck. And you understand Elio's a startup, so his overhead is very, very low. He's got a couple load boards. He maybe has a little bit of software. Maybe he bought a computer or phone, something like that. His overhead is very, very low. So that $7,000 is literally profit to help him, continue to get more clients and develop his business out. And so, yeah, I mean, that happens so quickly. So tell me, so you were cold calling. You started out, I mean, you had first kind of got the idea through a friend who said that they pay brokers. What happened there? Is there a relationship there where you're going to be able to do business with them, or do they require you to be in business a certain amount of time, or was there just too much of a process to start doing business with him? Where did that go?
So actually, we just had a follow-up conversation, because since then, what I didn't want to do is come to him with zero experience and potentially make an error or mistake. So I said, you know what, I already have that there. Let me come back to that once I get some experience on my own and go through some headache, right? Go through some scary situations. That way I'll know how to address and face them once I do, work with him. Now, he works for a pretty big company in the US, and it's almost like you go buy an expensive steak. You don't want to buy that expensive steak at the market and not know how to cook it, right? You want to make sure you do it right. So we have some things that are going to be working out between him and our company starting next week. But for now, I'm cold calling still. My wife and I are both on the phone, and I'm actually driving out, and I route myself per day. Part of our cadence is first thing in the mornings as we read, at least 15 minutes on industry news. We look at the rates. And the Friday prior, we do a weekly pre-plan for the day. So we kind of know exactly who we're going to call and what the plan is for that given day. And then I think you mentioned it in one of your videos, Dennis, a while back. I don't know which one it was, but you said one of the worst things that sales reps are good at or bad at is follow-up. They suck at follow-up. So I told her that, and I don't know if I got it from your video somewhere else, but the percentage rate of return from a buyer on the follow-up increases substantially after the third time or the third contact. So now we've given ourselves a goal that we're going to follow up with every cold call at least 5 times, right? Let it be through email, through the phone, or in live, but we're going to at least make, 5 contacts. And after the 5th contact, then we'll spread it out more and just, put it in our calendars, to kind of touch on them again. But other than that, we're just kind of moving on. And we decided to take on a different approach too. We're not trying to contact, 50 shippers in one day, because you kind of tend to go a little shallow, right? So we do take our time and we study the client, a few minutes, not too much. I'm talking about 15, 20 minutes on their website about us, and then do a quick research, find out anything about the company that we can. Who do they deal with? Who supplies them their raw ingredients? Who do they ship to? What are their rankings? Who do they compete against? So just kind of basic information before we make that phone call. That way we have some knowledge about their industry and their business.
Yeah, I love that. So I call that sales intelligence. And I think it's really important, that step that you're taking, because a lot of brokers, a lot of salespeople in general, whether you're in the logistics industry or not, they don't do that upfront research. And as you get better at it, it won't take you 15 minutes. You'll be able to recognize some common patterns, particularly. And you'll also, as you start digging into a specific niche, you'll start seeing these things repeating, and it'll just become second nature to you. But gathering that sales intelligence is extremely powerful, because what it does is it totally differentiates your conversation from the conversation of everybody else, most of everybody else that's cold calling. Because when
Right.
they cold call up, they're basically cold calling and begging for freight. That's what most freight brokers do. And that's the reason why you don't need to be a rocket scientist. You don't need to be some smooth talking salesperson. You don't need to have a ton of experience in order to get shippers and get customers in this industry. But what you do need to do is you do need to be a little bit different, right? And so I don't know if you've heard me say it before, but I've said it hundreds of times, and over the next several years, you'll hear it 100 more times. Different is better than better. Everybody plays the better game. Well, we're going to get better rates, and we're going to have better customer service, and we're going to have better technology. That's all great. And I think that's all important. And I love that. But it's not different than anybody else, because everybody says they have good customer service, and everybody says they have good communications, and everybody says they have good technology. So you're not different. You're just like everybody else. But your differentiation can be how you approach your prospect, right? A cold call that sounds like a cold call is one of the most difficult ways to be different. But if you were to use some sort of sales intelligence about maybe an industry topic that's very relevant at this given point, and you start using that as your conversation piece when you start talking to prospects, or they just got featured in some sort of an article, or you have some quote from their vice president or CEO, or they just acquired a new company, or there's new industry legislation that you can start a conversation about. What that does is that shows that you're educated, right? That shows the prospect that you're educated. And typically buyers want to do business with educated, providers. And statistically speaking, what happens is it's not always the best salesperson that gets the deal. It's typically the most educated. And I don't mean college education, right? That's all great and well. What I mean is about educated about their niche, educated about the buyer, educated about the industry, educated about the challenges, and educated in that realm. So that's what I mean by educated. Don't take that wrong. I've seen plenty of people that barely graduated high school that have been successful in this business, which is fine. It's not truly indicative of your background or your education as to whether you can be successful. So I love that. One thing I want to dive into really quick, because I don't want to lose track of this. And that is, you made the conscious decision to pull the trigger with that prospect because you felt like you had done enough due diligence, right? And I think that's where a lot of people that are new to the industry struggle. They have a real hard time with taking any sort of calculated risks. They're very scared to fail. And I get it. I totally get it. You don't want to have egg on your face, but here's what I'm going to tell you. You will never steal second with your foot on first, right? It's just not going to happen. You're going to get picked off every single time. Could you talk a little bit about that process and how you felt, and maybe, some of the butterflies in your stomach, and then how, and why you did it? Just expand on that a little bit, because I think that's probably one of the most real situations that everybody is going to feel as a new broker or new agent.
Right. The initial feeling or emotion was fear, and I've had to battle with fear in the past, and I've always felt that it's just crippled me. And it's just not, it seems like it's not just me, it's a lot of people, right, that go through this venture. But I just kind of made a commitment. I've had I surround myself by, good people, and I have a good support group of friends and family. And, when your colleagues at work saying, hey, they believe in you, and you're this, you're that, it's almost like, well, what's stopping me? Like, I need to believe in myself, right? So I was just done with it. I wasn't going to allow fear to get in the way of my dreams, and I just felt that there's no passion in betting small. So we had to go big, and that's why I said yes. That's why I said, what, we got this. So then I kind of put myself against the corner, put my back against the corner. So let's fight from here, and we're going to make it happen no matter what. So at this point, my name was on it. My company name was on the line, and I wanted to protect that as much as possible. And I wasn't going to let anything go down. And I wanted to make sure that this customer who believed in me and gave me a chance, I didn't want to fail them. I wanted to do everything to ensure that their project was successful, and that they looked back and thought, you know what? It's not how much I paid this guy. It's really the service and the level of quality work that he provided, in terms of communication and everything else. So here's my chance. Like, I didn't think I was going to get an opportunity to do this. So I had to take it right then and there. The most difficult part was obviously the before work and after work, and fielding phone calls during work, that was a challenge, right? And that's when my wife and I had a conversation, said, look, it's not realistic at this point for me, at least for me as an individual, to do this while I have a full-time job, because things come up and you have to be ready to address them, even if you have zero experience. So all hands on deck.
And so you decided at that point to do what? After you made that realization, you said, hey, listen, I can't do this while having a full-time job, which led to?
Yeah, so it led to ultimately pulling the plug, and I'm no longer employed at my company anymore, and we're launching full-time. So realistically, last week was my first full-time week. We're cold calling every day, and we're promoting a referral program. And I mean, we have a cadence now. It's a daily cadence, and we have set goals. And we're giving ourselves 4 to 5 months to get this thing right.
Yeah. So just follow the timeline, guys. He kind of stumbled across the idea in the fall. He pulled the trigger in January to go out and just apply for his license. It took a month or so to get that process going. He got it live. He started, doing some serious due diligence. He made some phone calls. He came across an opportunity with a cold call prospect that he had made. He decided to go all in on that opportunity. That project went extremely well. He generated over $7,000 in profit. And shortly after that, he resigned from his job. He's now working his business full-time with his wife. So I want you to understand that this you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. Right. So I loved it. He took a very phased approach, to doing this. He's got a family. He's got responsibilities, he's got bills, just like everybody else that's watching this. And so he took some calculated risks, but he went out there and he was willing to staple his name on that opportunity. And that was the leverage he needed to say, listen, I got to pot commit to this thing. And if I don't do it, then it's not going to work anyway. So there's no risk without reward. And to the victor goes the spoils. The fact is, everything probably didn't go according to Hoyle. And he probably made some mistakes, and there was probably some issues that came along the way, but that's okay. You'll figure those out, right? You'll figure those out. There's an old adage, and it goes like this. If you wait for all the lights to turn green before you head to work in the morning, you're always going to be late. Okay. That's just the way it's going to be. So, I have an amazing amount of respect for what Elio did. He took some risks, and here he is, kind of basically, living his dream, which was, for him not to necessarily be stuck in corporate America, although he probably had a great job. It sounds like, it was a good company and he was making a good living, but now he's taken that leap. Him and his wife are off to the races. So I'm super excited. Is there anything else that you want to add of, maybe lessons learned or just anything to try to help the audience? And then we're going to jump into some live Q&A here in a minute.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know I heard you say this, Dennis, not so long ago, last week sometime. There's less freight brokers today than what there were 3 or 5 years ago. But still a lot though. Over 17,000 licensed freight brokers. If you're getting started out and you're interested in this, it does take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of dedication, takes a lot of hard work, and you really have to do your homework in advance. Show up prepared to any conversation. Let it be a call with the truck driver, a call with the potential shipper. Definitely due diligence is a big piece of what this is. It's what I'm learning so far, and take advantage of the resources you have here with Dennis Brown. I took a lot from a Friday night Zoom call that we did with Yogi. Yogi decided to host one night, and to this day, it's part of our pitch. It's part of my pitch. When he asked, hey, why don't you rate the current freight brokers that you deal with? And I used it last week, and it worked in our favor. You're an independent freight broker, right? So you're up against these big conglomerates that make a lot of money and have the latest technology, and they make things very turnkey. So when the lady told me what Dennis just said now, she said, hey, listen, you're telling me you're reliable, that, you do this, you do that. That's what every freight broker tells me. How are you different? I'm like, let me ask you, how many freight brokers do you deal with? I deal with 5 right now. Okay. If you were to combine them all together, how would you rate and grade from 1 to 10 those freight brokers? Because I'd give them about 7. They're pretty good. Okay, 7. So at best, they're C+. How would you rate your client base? Are you dealing with C plus client base or A or B plus? No, they're all A, right? There's a gap. Allow me to fill that gap. Give me an opportunity to earn your business, right? So most of the big conglomerates you deal with, you just mentioned earlier that you just have a hard time getting a hold of them. They're probably employees. I'm not an employee. I'm an independent freight broker. We work before 8 a.m. We work after 6 p.m. So you'll have around the clock service for the most part when you deal with us. And she goes, okay. She kind of smiled and laughed and she goes, okay, we'll start with a few loads and we'll see how that goes and we'll go from there. So it's every situation's do or die because again, I have a wife, I have kids, I have a lab, we got to feed, we got to pay mortgage, so it's, you put yourself in a situation and you find out that you're a different individual because now it's on you. You got to make it happen, and as you go out there and you're building your websites for your company and you're sharing this information, make sure you don't put any content on your website that you can't hold yourself accountable to, right? So use that as an integrity check. Don't say stuff just to say it. Because I guarantee you're going to come across a shipper who's going to say, you know what? Well, you mentioned this on your website, and now you're not being able to hold up your part of the bargain. So just I cautious that a little bit because I see a lot of freight brokers out there in the websites, and it's interesting. But most importantly, network as much as you can. Network up front. One of the things that I still hold true to this day, and I will, is when Dennis referenced niches. Right? There's riches and niches. So I decided to go through flatbed. Primarily because I'm in Southeast Texas, right? So we're the capital of energy and there's oil gas companies all over the place. And I felt that's kind of an area where I want to focus in. By default, I landed on steel pipe, right? So guess what? This week I'm going to work on farm equipment a little bit just to kind of, still stay within flatbed, but eventually I'd like to hone into a specific commodity and go from there. We've had our hands in a little bit of everything. We haven't just done steel pipe. We've also done like big bulldozers that weigh over 50,000 pounds. And that's been very interesting as well. So we have the options, but our focus is flatbed freight, 100%, right? 2% being hot shot, but 90% being flatbed or step deck freight. And that's what we're going to stick to. In my previous experience, we did a lot of dry van with work, you're right. But in my dad's even asked, why don't you just do dry van? That's what you know. I'm like, that's the easy thing. I want to go and learn something new and see what we can do. And then maybe fall back to that one day. I think, Dennis, when you started your business, if I'm not mistaken, you were very specific on either outbound, inbound lanes. And I think it was either dry van or reefer trucks, but you didn't, and I remember you had an agent who said, hey, listen, I have an opportunity with this flatbed. You're like, no, we're not going to do that. We focus on this niche. So I came across the same situation with somebody who thinks they want to be an agent. Goes, hey, I have an opportunity, but I can do dry van all day. I'm like, sorry, man, I don't do dry van. I'm flatbed. So I just want to be the specialist in flatbed. We want to definitely dominate this region, and we want to be known for the flatbed specialist, for Southeast Texas.
For sure. Jack of all trades, master of none is not the way to become successful as a freight broker startup. Start with one niche, become proficient, develop that niche out. Build a carrier database, build a reputation, understand the rates, start delivering at a high level of service. And then if you want to expand into another niche strategically, absolutely go ahead, do that. We had lots of niches that we grew over the time that I had my freight brokerage, but it all started with one. So we became the de facto expert in that niche, and it served us well. We did over $1 million in revenue our first year, and $3 million the second year, and $6 million. Right. And you guys know the whole story. So I look forward to that story with Elio. And just, a couple things to take away from what he said before we dive into Q&A. And that is, we talked about the niche thing. I think that's super important. The other thing you said when you talked about that cold call, how there's a lot of large companies out there, whether that be C.H. Robinson or Total Quality Logistics or TQL or XPO or all these large conglomerates. You have to find the advantage that you have over them. And the advantage to that is what I call big fish, small pond, or small fish, big pond, right? So as a shipper, as a customer, and this is just a little bit of a sales strategy for you, as a customer of a freight broker, would you rather be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? With those large companies, they're small fish in a big pond, particularly if they don't have over $5 or $10 million worth of freight spend per year. So you're a small fish in a big pond. You're not going to get their best resources. You're not going to get their best team. You're not going to get their best rates. You're not going to get their best trucks. You're just not going to get their best. But to me, Mr. Shipper, you're a big fish in a small pond. Yeah, we're small, but that's okay. That's going to allow me to spend a lot more time. You're going to get the absolute best out of us versus secondhand with someone who's large. And that's just a simple differentiation, right? The service is the same. We're going to use the same trucks. And we're going to use the same trucks. The rates are all going to be fairly comparable within probably $50 per load, right? And so the thing is you have to look at the strengths that you have. And sometimes being small is one of the biggest benefits you can have. So, I mean, I could continue to comment. I mean, Elio had made up some really good points. Totally appreciate you being here on the interview. I think it's very inspiring. I'm so excited to hear the progress from your wife and everybody that's involved in the business. It's going to become this family venture. And I'm sure we're going to stay in touch with all that. But before we dive into Q&A, if you are listening to this, if you're brand new or you've been listening and you're on the fence debating on whether you want to become a freight broker, Elio said it. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's something where you do have to do the work. But I've put together a course called Freight Broker Bootcamp. Had that course for over 10 years, have trained well over 8,000 students, and we have a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee, ironclad. You don't even have to give us a reason why you don't want to continue with it. We'll give you your money back if it's within the first 60 days. So you literally have zero risk, okay? So if you're curious about becoming a freight broker, freight agent, check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. So let's do the giveaway, all right? So you got 1 minute to share the stream. If you join me late, I'm going to be giving away the shirt that is on my body right now that says Freightpreneur, someone who solves problems you don't know you have in ways that you can't understand. I'm going to give away one of these shirts. All you got to do is share the stream. So go in and share the stream, whether that be on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Instagram, wherever. And then come back into the comments here and type #shared. Again, this is the honor system. So I'm counting on you to be honorable and actually share the stream. But if you do, I'm going to pick one quick winner right now. You got 60 seconds. I'm going to pick one winner. And then that winner I'm going to ship off that shirt. And then we are going to do live Q&A. So stick around for the live Q&A. Okay. All right. So let's see in the meantime, if we've got any more shared here. Yeah, cool. So we got a bunch of people that are sharing the stream. That's awesome. And if for some reason you don't have a big social media following, just get a copy of the link and send it to 3 people via email. That's fine too. No problem. I'm just trying to spread the word about these free trainings. And again, the more you guys engage in these free trainings on Monday, the more likely I am to continue them, right? I do these absolutely free. They're no cost. Anybody can join these free Freight Broker Bootcamp lives. I determine whether I do the next one based upon the level of engagement I get in the last one, right? So if no one were to show up, which has never happened, then chances are I'm not going to do it again. But a lot of people show up, a lot of people get excited, a lot of people engage. I'm trying to just provide an enormous amount of value for you to show you that, listen, it's not easy, but it's doable. And not everybody's going to succeed. But if you follow the roadmap and you're willing to take a little bit of risk, and that's the reason why I had Elio on here today, I think you'll be shocked how far you can go in a fairly short period of time. So let's see what we got for people that have shared. Okay, cool. So we got a bunch of people that have shared. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to scroll through the feed and randomly, with my eyes closed, pick one person that has shared the stream, and we're going to give them the shirt. So here we are. Let's see what we got. And you can only win once. Here it is. The winner is Lucas Hilgeman. Lucas Hilgeman is the winner. So Lucas, here's what I need you to do. I'm going to send you this shirt, but I need you to go to the Freight Broker Bootcamp Facebook page and message me with your full name, your address, your mailing address, and the size. Okay. Now, I don't know what sizes I have. I'll message you back and let you know, but give me the size that you'd prefer. And I will send that out to you here in the next week. And all I ask of you, wear the shirt, take a picture and send it back to me. I'd love to see you with the shirt, and maybe we'll be able to feature you on the Facebook page, and maybe we'll have you on here as a future interview. Who knows, depending upon how things go for you and where you are in your journey. So, all right. Congratulations, Lucas. Let's dive into some Q&A. Make sure that you go to my Facebook page and send me your full name, your address, and your size. Okay. Otherwise I can't send it to you. I'm not a mind reader. All right, so here we are. Q&A. Who's got questions? Type them in the chat box. Type them in the chat box. Let me know what questions you guys have. And, If you specifically want to hear some feedback from Elio or me, you can direct it either way. Depending upon the question, maybe we'll both answer it. So jump in with a couple of questions, whatever that may be. All right, here's a question from Paul Inglet. Paul asks, do freight brokers need to issue 1099s to motor carriers, or are they considered exempt due to being categorized as freight? Okay, so as a freight broker, you do need to get an I-9 from your carriers, okay? And an I-9 is a document that where they are providing you with their tax ID number, okay? But you do not need to issue 1099s to all of your carriers. You do have to have that I-9 as a record of a carrier or a vendor you've done business with, but you do not have to issue a 1099 to all of the carriers that you do business with, okay? So that's the good news. It's going to save you a lot of time and energy and even money, because I'll tell you that when you have a thriving brokerage, it's not going to be unusual for you to do business with 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 different carriers a year or more, right? Because sometimes you're going to use a carrier once a month. Other times you're going to use a carrier once a day or multiple times a day, but you don't always know when you're going to need them or how everything's going to line up. So you do not have to do a 1099 for all of the carriers, but you do need to have an I-9, which is a part of their, is the I-9 or the W? Yeah, W9, not I-9, W9. I'm sorry. W9, not I-9. I-9 is immigration. I think that's an immigration, making sure that you're a U.S. citizen. So it's a W9. I apologize, right? So it's a W9 to make sure that you have their tax ID number. So good question. What else we got? All right. So this is for Elio. You mentioned a referral program. Can you elaborate a little on that? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so it's 1% off the invoice amount. That's what it is. And in fact, one of the customers we had early on in our stages of our business, we paid out $400 on that deal. So we paid out cash money. Met the young man at the bar, and I asked him to invite his friends who are within the industry as well. And I presented the award there in front of his buddies over beers and appetizers. And that led to more referrals too. So I'm finding out that, referrals are a pretty big deal, because then you tie a name to that call. So no longer does it become a cold call. Now you're like, hey, listen, I spoke to Nick and he mentioned you and he used to work there. And man, he told me you love donuts. So I brought some chocolate donuts. Let's say I give you a couple of quotes on your lanes, and it's simple as that, but I did communicate with some guys in Florida, and they're doing like 1.5 or 2% as well. It just depends on you. You know what I mean? So yeah.
So just to do the math for you guys, just so you understand, math is not an exact science, but I'm going to walk through it because I suck at it. So let's say that the invoice on the load for a shipper is $1,500, right? A typical full truckload, right? 1% of that is $15. So 1% of the gross is $15. That's a generous commission. That's a generous referral fee, because he's not just paying it on one load. He's not just paying it on two loads. He's paying it on all the loads that that customer does for the lifetime of that customer. Now, do you see how there's a difference? I hear people talking about referral programs, and they're like, oh, well, if you get me a customer, I'll give you $100 or I'll give you $200. I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything, but the reality is people are not going to go out of their way for $100. They just won't, right? And not only are they not going to go out of their way, but they're not going to potentially risk a relationship with a prospect, with someone that they know, not necessarily a prospect, but a relationship that they have with a fellow coworker or a cousin or an uncle or just a friend from high school or college for $100, because potentially you could screw the whole thing up. Now, they're going to have a certain level of trust for you, but the fact is that there has to be a risk-reward ratio. And so that's why I always teach to have a recurring referral program. And I like having a percentage of profit or a percentage of revenue, and you just pay it out once a month, right? You just pay it out to them once a month. If you want to get a steady source of referrals, you got to be willing to pay for them. And so I love that referral program. Now, I will tell you that a referral program is very beneficial, but it's not going to keep you as busy as you need to be. You're probably not going to get enough referrals to actually see significant growth in the business, particularly after you get launched. So you are still going to have to do some other sales, right? You're going to have to do some cold outreach, whether that's through email or through phone or through LinkedIn or or face to face out doing, kind of pressing the flesh. But the reality is it can have a significant impact. I told the story how I got a referral early in my business when I started back in 2003, 2004, ended up doing, hundreds of thousands of dollars with that client. It was a good friend of mine who wasn't in logistics. He knew the vice president of a rubber recycling company. We hit it off. Next thing you knew, we were moving most of their freight. And I was probably very similar to where Elio was at the time. I didn't quite know everything that I was doing, but I had a pretty good roadmap and I figured out the rest along the way. So I took some calculated risks, and to the victor goes the spoils. So yeah, that's great. I love that. So a referral program can be beneficial, but I do want to be honest with you and tell you it may not be enough to make you profitable early on. So you are going to have to do some separate sales outreach, just like Elio described. All right, let's see what the next question is here. Boom, we're going to scroll. All right, so here's a question from Derek. Do you have to go to a lawyer to set up an LLC, or was it easy enough to do on your own? No, you do not need a lawyer for an LLC. You're just going to spend an extra $300 to $500 having him file the corporation for you. Go to Google, search for file incorporation in your state. You'll literally will get the whatever state you're in. You'll get the state website. They'll talk about where to file it. You click on the link and it will literally walk you through step by step. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Here's your cost. Here's the timeline it's going to take. It's really simple. Okay. It's really simple. You don't need to pay me. You don't need to pay Elio, and you definitely don't need to pay an attorney to file your LLC. But you are going to need some sort of a corporation, whether it be an S corp or a C corp or an LLC. Any of those are fine. And I'm not a tax professional, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV. But I think an LLC it makes a lot of sense. If you do decide to get a corporation, you're probably going to want an S corporation. And you can talk a little bit with your accountant about that, depending upon how you decide to set up your company and your tax structure. So, all right. So you didn't use it as a lawyer, did you, Elio?
No, but you covered it, but I was gonna say, make sure you talk to an accountant just to make sure it works for your situation based on your expenses and potential income that's coming through. So I would definitely reach out to your accountant for sure.
Yeah. Most cases it's going to be an LLC or an S corp, but you definitely want to run it by an accountant real quick. And they're not even going to charge you. If you have a friendly, they're going to do it just on the hopes that you're going to be successful and they're going to get your accounting later. So it's not going to be something you're going to get charged for in most cases if you just have a basic question.
That's exactly right.
Yep. All right. So let's see, what do we got? I'm scrolling here. Okay. So here's one for Elio. I knew you'd get a lot of questions. Do you ask the carrier about their equipment? Do you ask the carrier about their equipment? Go ahead. Talk about that.
Absolutely. When we're kind of get all these carriers for this project coming up, I use truckstop.com. That's what I use. And so I was able to gather a lot of information through emails, and I did a blast. I say, if you're receiving this because you're part of an A-list carrier group and we're working to seek out carriers for this project, as they would call me, I would ask them, hey, do me a favor. Do you have, can you send me a couple of pictures of your truck with this specific cargo on it, just to have proof that they, what they're telling me is accurate. And then, hey, if you have anything on social media, let me know. I mean, I'm also on social media. We can kind of interact that way. So then I can kind of follow them and see what they have going on. And a lot of carriers you'll find, they're really proud of their rigs. They're proud of their cargo. They're proud of what they're moving, and they'll post it on Instagram or Facebook. Yep. So I did have one instance where it paid off for me, and unfortunately it didn't pay off for him. But I said, listen, do me a favor, shoot me a picture. When he sent me the picture, guess what? There was 2 busted tires on there. I'm thinking, buddy, I can't take that chance. So we decided to move on. So yes, definitely ask them about their equipment and ask them how often they change their tires. How often are they doing the maintenance? I mean, just basic casual conversation, because you'd be shocked what a basic question will turn and lead into in terms of them opening up and giving you more information that could potentially help you with other carriers.
Yeah. And it's also going to differentiate you from other brokers, because most brokers, here's what the conversation sounds like when they talk to a carrier. How much do you want for the load to go from A to B? Or here, I can pay you $800 to move from A to B. you in or out, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about rate, and it's very transactional. The difference between what Elio did was a little bit more relationship based, right? So he was inquiring about their business. A carrier, whether they're an owner operator or they're whatever the business is, right? They're leased on or whatever the case may be. They've spent an enormous amount of time, getting set up in business, and they've got a lot of risk. You want to talk about having risk? Go sign a loan for, 75 or 100 or $150,000 to get a truck and a trailer. You want to talk about having, some skin in the game? That's the true skin in the game, right? That's why I have tons of respect for drivers and carriers, is because they've got skin in the game. And so ask them questions that are important to them, which is about their business. And all of a sudden you'll be surprised how much they open up and the relationship that you'll develop, as opposed to being very transactional, which is what most brokers are and drives me absolutely crazy. Focus on relationships over transactions. So yeah, I second that. I would say, particularly when you're talking to people, I'd ask them how many different tractors they have, the types of trailers they have, the lanes that they run, how many drivers they have. Are they looking to add more trucks? Are they kind of falling back? How long have they been in business? How did they get into the business? I mean, start having a real conversation with people, right? It's not rocket science. It's really just about, building relationships, communicating, and then connecting the dots at that point. And you're going to find out that some of those conversations are not going to go anywhere. And some of those conversations are going to be significantly delayed gratification, because you won't do business with them for months or months down the road. And then all of a sudden it'll become, you'll get an opportunity to do business, and others will literally just fall into place, like the situation with Elio, where you'll be filling holes right away, where they have a specific set of skills and capacity that match up with your exact needs for your client, and you're going to make the match and you're going to make magic. Okay. And that's where it all happens. So yeah, it all starts with relationship building. So I love that. All right. Okay, so here's a question for both of us. This is great live, very informative. Thanks for breaking it all down to the very step. I would like to know, what's the best way to get a realistic and fair rate quote for a shipper? Elio, I'm going to let you take it away. However you did it when you got that first shipper, what was the basic fundamental workflow that you went through to make sure you did the due diligence? How did that work?
Yeah, so I use two resources. I use the DAT as a resource, and then I use the Truck Stop, as I mentioned before. I actually called Truck Stop directly, and I spoke to some of their experienced personnel that are ex, carriers or ex freight brokers, and they were able to kind of provide some insight there. In addition to that, I called a lot of carriers. I interviewed at least 5 or 6 carriers, and would ask them, and I would get kind of varying response. And to be honest with you, I'd go down the middle and just kind of be fair. Right. I want to be fair to both shipper and carrier, because I want to lock in this deal. I want to make sure I earn it, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the carrier feels that he's getting paid to provide the right service. I'll tell you this. I learned late last week that sometimes the website or the Truck Stop or DAT isn't always accurate. So be sure that you're not looking at a nationwide rate, right? Make sure you're not just looking at a region. Okay. I would even recommend, I could be wrong, Dennis, but I mean, go ahead and pay for a subscription to a load board as a carrier. That way, when you log in, you can actually run that lane, and you'll see what the top 10, top 15 lanes are going for from the carrier perspective. Like, what are the other brokers are posting up there? Because you can't see that as a freight broker with your subscription on Truck Stop. But
unfortunately, they won't let you do that unless you have a carrier MC.
Right. So if you know,
a guy who's a carrier, maybe he'll let you in.
If you have a decent relationship with somebody, they may help you out.
Yeah,
but anyway, at the end of the day, I get the information from calling the carriers, and you start doing the math, and you go from there. I mean, look, I don't have the answer, because sometimes I want to go and make a decent margin, but at the same time, at what cost? So I'm starting off, and you got to value yourself. Where do you currently work at? How much you're getting paid? Divide that by 12, divide that by 4, divide that by 5 days, divide that by 8 hours in a day. Okay, what's your value? What's your time worth? So then you have to take that. There's so many different other variables that go into play. And then what's the cost of diesels? Are going up or down? So you can get very analytical with this, or you can just kind of shoot your shot and see what you get back. But I do tend to look at various different variables from the carrier perspective, from the shipper, in case they come back and say, hey, you're out of control, it's too high. Then I can come back and tell them why it's at this rate. right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You brought up a couple of really good points. There's three variables that you want to take a very close look at. One is you do want to look at the rating tools that are built into the DAT or truck stop, but you do want to understand that they are not always 100% accurate because
Right.
it's data in, data out. Particularly, they're not going to be nearly as accurate in a volatile market, right? When rates are fluctuating up and down based upon, a global pandemic or based upon fuel rates going through the roof, that volatility is going to throw the rating tools off. Okay. So you got to understand that, number one. Number two, you want to understand secondarily to that, but in conjunction with that, what's going on in the market? Is fuel going up or is fuel going down? You're going to find that that's going to be a big variable. If fuel is on the rise, then you're always going to want to probably ask a little bit more. But the most important variable that you got to control and that you want to understand is what do actual carriers give you back as feedback for the rates? So you want to call some carriers. Now there's a couple of mistakes that people make here. Rather than calling a carrier, this is why I say go to the rate boards and look at those tools and look at that market intelligence that you can gather from those tools first, and then call carriers. And here's why. Because when you call a carrier about a load going from a van load from Buffalo to Atlanta, and I know it's 1,100 miles, and I know the data is telling me that I should be paying the truck $1,300. I'm just doing total arbitrary math here, right? $1,300. When I call the carrier, I don't ask the carrier, how much do you want to run a load from Buffalo to Atlanta? Okay. Because that's like writing an open check. That's like giving them a check, signing it and saying, how much do you want to get paid for that? They're going to give you a high rate because they know that brokers are going to negotiate and they know that fuel prices going up and they know they're going to need more cost and they're trying to protect their bottom line and make sure they stay in business. So rather than asking an open-ended question like, hey, how much do you want to run this load from point A to point B? Ask the question, listen, based on what I'm seeing on Truck Stop and based on the feedback I have from other carriers, we're looking at somewhere around $1,300. And you just zip your lip. And they're going to say one of three things. They're going to say, you're out of your mind. I need at least $1,800 to run that lane. Duly noted. You jot it down. They're going to say, that's close, but I need a little bit more in order to do it because fuel's on the rise. Could you do 1,400 or could you do 1,500? Or they're going to say, sold, I'm in, send me the rate confirmation. That's what you're going to get, right? There's three buckets. That's how it's almost always going to fall in. The fourth bucket is potentially you could get hung up on. That will happen once in a blue moon. In most cases, they'll throw a big rate out at you before they do that. But the thing is that you need to gather that sales intelligence, that market intelligence, that rating intelligence. And there's no shortcut to doing that. If you think the rating tools are going to give you all the right rates so that you can just copy down the per mile and add a fuel surcharge and your margin on it, it's not going to work. It's designed to give you a baseline that you can then build on. So there's no substitute to having conversations with carriers, and not just any carriers, but we're talking about carriers that actually run those exact lanes. Mm-hmm. So you go into the truck stop and you look at the lane history for that lane, and you can actually see carriers that have posted their trucks over the last 30, 60, 90 days, how many times they've posted their truck, and you can see their name and phone number, and you call them, you say, listen, I see you guys are posting your truck a lot in this lane. How often do you have trucks up here? Oh, we got trucks every day. Great. I've got some dedicated freight coming out of here. Let's talk. And then you start that conversation. It's really, it's simple. It's a simple process, but you actually have to do that sort of due diligence. You can't just shoot from the hip. Now at that point, you're going to come back with, you will have talked to maybe 5 or 10 different carriers. You're going to have a baseline. You're going to have the high, you're going to have the low, you're going to have the middle. Now you need to figure out, there's no exact science to figuring out what you're going to quote the shipper. Part of it's going to be a realistic expectation of what you're going to have to pay the truck plus your margin. Now, I will tell you, when you first start doing business with a client, don't tack on 20% margin to every load because the probability of you hitting the mark is probably much lower. You can always raise your rates over time, okay, slowly. So my suggestion to you is start out with a little bit lesser margin with a brand new client and then work your way into other lanes and other opportunities. And that's how you get the ball moving. Now, I'm not saying to work for free. I'm not saying that you can't make any profit, but on a $1,500 load, right? If it's $1,500 to the shipper and I want to make 20%, or if it's $1,500 to the carrier and I want to make 20%, I got to sell it to the shipper at $1,800. It'd be great to make $300 in that load, but I'd be pretty happy to have a brand new client if I was making $1 or $1.50 and a brand new client that I knew that I'd be able to grow with over time, particularly as a startup, because cash flow is king. So that should give you a little bit of a framework to build upon as far as doing rates. Oh, any comments on that, Elio? Did that make sense?
That's spot on. I mean, the only thing that I can add to that is just, make sure that you're educating yourself. That way you can have those conversations with these carriers and they know that you're kind of in the know and you've done your due diligence. So you can avoid the riffs of like, hey, I expect only 2,500. Well, that's weird because the going rate right now is $230 per mile. You know what I mean? So no, that's perfect. Thanks. I'm glad this thing's recorded because I'm gonna go back and watch this.
Yeah, don't get detoured if a carrier gives you a little bit of grief. Sometimes they will. Sometimes they're just in a mood. Sometimes they just they just had a big repair bill, or sometimes they just filled up their tank and it's costing them, $200 more this week than it was last week. I mean, those are realistic challenges that a carrier has. Don't take it personal. Don't get upset. Make the next phone call. Filter through those carriers. Do your due diligence. Use that due diligence to go out and make your best, put your best price forward. And in a lot of cases, you're going to miss the mark. Try to get feedback from the shipper. Maybe you can adjust the rate a little bit. Maybe you can sell value because they're, the reason why they're letting you quote is because they're not letting you quote because they're bored. They're letting you quote because there's enough pain, there's enough issue there for them to be willing to entertain a phone call, an email, a couple of phone calls to see if you're going to be able to help them. And if they're exclusively focused on price, I've said it many times before, they're not the kind of company you want to do business with anyway. It's got to be a function of value, not just price, right? So I've talked about that before. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we'll be here for another hour. All right, so let's see what else we got. Any other questions? Let's see. All right, so here's a question. Who's responsible for detention and lumper fees, shipper or broker? The answer is yes. So here's how it works. As a broker and as a shipper, carrier. So what happens is this. Your shippers are typically going to have to pay detention and lumper fees on any loads, but you have to make it clear with the shipper when you're quoting them that is the case. So if you're quoting the freight, you're going to say, listen, this includes 2 hours of detention. Okay. Every load comes with 2 hours of detention. Anything over that, it's $50 an hour or $75 an hour or whatever, $100 an hour, whatever you want to do for detention. Okay. So when you quote it, you got to let them know it comes with 2 hours of load, unload. And then at that point, they're going to be under detention. They have to agree to that. That's reasonable. That's kind of a normal standard, right? In the industry. As far as lumpers go, when you're doing business with shippers, you also have to let them know that as well. This is the freight charge. Any lumpers or accessorials or, rerouting or, delays or whatever the case may be, those are all additional charges. Now, the way it will work is you will, let's use detention as an example. Let's say a carrier gets to the delivery point, they're in line and they've been waiting for 4 hours, right? They're past the 2 hour mark and they let you know. They say, listen, we got to start getting some detention. You're then going to notify the client that they're past. You're going to send them an email or make a phone call and say, listen, this guy's not getting unloaded. We're getting into some detention time. I'll let you know how things progress. But if there's anything on your end that you can squeak the wheels, get the grease moving so we can get this guy unloaded. Okay, great. Usually they'll make a phone call or send an email. We'll get that guy unloaded. If there's an hour, at the end of the day, if there's an hour of detention, the carrier is going to bill you for the detention. Let's say it's $50 an hour. You're then going to pass that through and bill that to the shipper. So the shipper ends up paying it. Now, I'm going to tell you that I never used accessorials as a profit center. So we didn't mark up detention. We didn't mark up any of those accessorial charges. It was a true pass through. That was the way we did it. Not all brokers do that, but that's the way that we did it, right? So, you should be making a margin on the load itself without the extra detention fees. And so that's the basic framework of how any accessorials will work between the carrier, broker, and shipper. Does that go in line with what your mind is, Elio?
100%. That's exactly what I'm facing with right now this morning, actually, because we have an added stop that goes out of here to to Lockwood in Missouri. So it's an added stop, and I already got some pushback on that. So I got 3 different responses. Hey, you need to add $150 to that. The other guy was like, you know what, $75 covers it. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, with a stop charge, a lot of times it'll be whatever the out of route miles are, right? The extra mileage and some sort of a stop charge, which will usually be somewhere between $50 and $100 for a stop charge. That's the baseline, right? It'll range in there. So if they've got, if a driver picks up a load and then all of a sudden they got to, add an extra pick or an extra drop on that, they're going to be looking for extra miles, whatever that outer route miles is, plus some sort of a stop charge. So yeah, good. Perfect. All right. Couple more questions. Then we're going to wrap it up for today. Elio's got to go make some money. Let me see. I'm scrolling. Okay. So here's a question for you. What type of insurance did you start out with? General, auto, errors and emissions, or just basic contingent? Thanks for any info. What did you do when you set up your brokerage as far as insurance? And then I'll give you my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's a great question. This took the longest, to be honest with you, to find a company that would actually cover our business. And, I did a lot of research on contingent cargo insurance, whether or not I actually really needed. And I consulted with different people within the industry, and it had vast more experience than I did. And I decided to go with professional liability insurance only, right? So we make sure that, part of our onboarding process for carriers is that we confirm their insurance and what our requirements are and make sure that we're on their certificate. We actually call and confirm that they are on this plan, this policy, and that's it. I mean, that seems to be enough so far for the most part on the loads that we're dealing with. Most of the loads that we cover are the values no more than $40,000 to $50,000. So we're, it's $100,000 cargo minimum for the most part, and we're good there. So far, I have not had a shipper require or ask us of that. However, if that were to be the case, then we'd be prepared to kind of take on a policy for the sake of gaining a new client that's going to do that level of business.
Yeah, perfect. You don't need any of those insurances in order to become a broker. Mm-hmm. Now, what you got is general liability. Basically, you got the general so he got a general liability policy. And so that would be your first step if you were going to get a fundamental basic policy, although it's not required, and his shippers that he's doing business with aren't asking for that, or contingent cargo or any of that. But I agree with Elio in the fact that I personally would not go out and get contingent cargo, nor did I go out and get contingent cargo when we first started. When I went and got contingent cargo? When I needed it. I went and got it when I saw an opportunity that I had done enough due diligence on that I knew could more than pay for the policy. And then at that point, it's a no-brainer, right? I'm financing it with a new client. And then at that point, all of my future clients are going to be able to benefit from the insurance that I got. But I think people make a much bigger deal out of this than they need to. There are a lot of shippers out there. Matter of fact, the heavy majority of shippers do not require contingent cargo insurance. Now, if you are targeting Fortune 1000 brands, you're going to have a much higher percentage of companies that are going to require it than if you're targeting smaller to medium-sized companies, okay? Statistically speaking, small to medium-sized companies are not going to require it as much. Larger companies are, because they have too many attorneys and they're trying to dot their I's and cross their T's and justify their corporate salary. And if they're on here listening, too bad. So, good question though. All right. Last question, guys. Last question. And then we're going to wrap it up. Let's see if we can get a good one here. As a new broker. All right. So let's do this one. How long did it take you to get your first prospect? So there's some lingo here, right? So there's lead, there's prospect, there's customer, there's all these different variables. I'm assuming you're asking, how long did it take you to get your first customer? Or maybe we'll answer that. How long did it take you to get your first customer? But then secondarily to that, how long did it take you to do your first quote? Because I think that would be a little bit more of maybe what we would call a prospect, right? They're interested enough to give you the opportunity to quote. So there's 2 parts to that. 1, quote, 2nd, customer. How long did it take you? I mean, if you could roughly, how many calls or days or hours, or however, whatever metrics you want to put that into.
It took me 4 days. It took
4 days of just making a bunch of calls.
Yeah. So what we did is in advance.
And that was 4 days to get your first client.
That's correct. Yeah.
Well, how many quotes did you do before you got your first client?
I did 2.
Okay. So here, now I want to say something to all of you. So lean in a little bit. That is not the norm. I don't want to paint that picture that you're going to make 2 phone calls or 2 quotes and you're going to get a shipper. It happens, and it might happen for you, but statistically speaking, it's probably going to take you more calls and more quotes. I'm going to give Elio a lot of credit because there's an old adage, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? He did the due diligence. He was prepared. He was ready to take a risk. He knew what the truck was going to cost, and he took the risk and he went out and did it. And it happened very early for him, but it's not always going to happen that fast. Okay. I'm very realistic. This is not a get rich quick scheme. This is not something where you're going to go out and make a few phone calls and you're going to get rich. It doesn't work that way. But if you're willing to invest some time and energy and resources into doing your due diligence, finding your niche, doing a lot of the things that Elio talked about, what he has done already and what he's doing every day, you'll be surprised how far you can get in a year. Right. Yeah. So you can expand on that a little bit, but I think it's really important. I want to be very realistic with the audience because you ran into a great situation. And just so you know, I've heard lots of other students that have had similar situations, but that's not always going to be the case.
Right. Right. And I'd like to expand on that a little bit if I could. So again, guys, this is 6-7 months in the making, right? Where I was obviously kind of learning about this stuff. In January, I started spreading the word. I started kind of reaching out to certain people that I trusted that I could potentially, maybe they knew someone within the industry. So I was shaking the tree on a shipper the first week of February, right? And he was kind of like teaching me how the lingo, how quotes work. Sometimes it's done through a text message. You know, it's not a formal quote that you get from QuickBooks or truckstop.com, and which was hard for me to grasp. So by the time I got to that week where I was just cold calling on that Tuesday, and I got cold called on Tuesday. I did a follow-up email Wednesday night with a quote. That's when I was kind of scared, like, what am I going to send here? And Friday, he got back to me and said, hey, listen, we need some trucks for the following week. So that's how that worked. But I had already been kind of spreading the word out a little bit and talking to people. So customers, I'll tell you, we have about 10 customers. Clients, we've had 3 clients. Clients are paying clients, right? Customers are the ones that they send you lanes and you quote them, then you don't hear back from them sometimes, right? But the actual paying clients, we have 3 right now. That's it. I'll tell you, all week last week, we gave out 7 quotes. We cold called every day, 0, got nothing in return. Okay. So I also kind of we put that as part of our business plan. Understand the first 30 days, we're throwing bait. We're planting seeds and we're going to harvest that down the road. But right now we understand that we're not always going to get that. I got a phone call this morning from a lead of a client. So I was working on that when Dennis and I were texting this morning. I kind of missed 3 of his text messages because I was working on that deal. So I don't know what to expect from here. I'm waiting for another 75 load week like I did in week 1, but not sure what to expect.
Yeah. Well, and I think that hit spot on. I think you just need to understand that you are going to have to do some outbound sales outreach. There's no load board that you're going to go to, even though there's this big myth out there that you can go quote on these shipper load boards and you're going to find all this freight. That's not going to work, right? You're going to have to actually make some phone calls. You're going to have to do some outreach. You're going to have to get dirty. And that's just the way it is. So if you are completely and 100% adverse to sales, this is probably not the business for you, or you're going to have to find a partner that's going to be willing to do that part of the business while you do the operation side of the business, which can work. Okay. But I want to be honest with you, you are going to have to go out there and make some sales calls. It's a sales intensive business. We've talked a lot about sales on this interview. I've talked a lot about sales in my other lives. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I want to thank Elio very much for being a part of the Freight Broker Bootcamp Live and the community and telling his inspiring story. If you guys want to continue to see these lives, here's what I need you to do on Facebook. I need you to click that bell to make sure you get notified, because what happens is if you click that bell on Facebook, you're going to get notified of all these future live videos, right? Same thing goes for YouTube. You got to click that notification bell and make sure you get notified. I do these types of interviews trainings, free trainings every week, every Monday. And then I release new videos on YouTube every week as well. Truly appreciate you being here. Any final words?
No, just honestly, guys, just keep at it, man. Believe in yourself. Don't get discouraged. Face your fear. You're not going to die from hard work. There's a question on here right now. Someone says, hey, give some examples of the benefits of joining boot camp. One of the biggest benefits for me, honestly, it's a safe space. Okay. You come in here, you ask questions, and people are willing to help. Some are inspiring other people. But if you go on to Dennis's website, once you become a member, there's a lot of very helpful articles that I've read more than once now, because when I go back and read them the second time, I have a different framework. I have a different level of experience. And now I captured something that I didn't catch the first time around because I was totally green to the industry. So get involved. And if you really want this, just make it happen. Honestly, don't be afraid. Cold call. Do not be scared to cold call. Prepare a little bit, do your due diligence. And you know what? Take some losses, take some hits, because at the end of the day, that's what you're going to learn. Take your hits. You want to lose, you want to fail, you want to get laughed at. It's okay. Overcome it. Have thick skin. Don't get emotional. So good luck to everybody. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you so much. Listen, like, comment, share the stream. I'll see you next week, Monday at noon. We'll do another Freight Broker Live. Truly appreciate you being here. Have an awesome day, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks.